Hello, everybody. Good morning and welcome back for the third day of Solar Media's Energy Storage Digital Series. My name is Lucy and I'll be your host for today's session. I'm the producer for the Energy Storage Wider Series, which we have in Europe, the US, and soon to be in Latin America. I would just like to start by saying a huge thank you to our founding sponsor, Clean Horizon Consulting, and our series sponsors, EDF and NEC. Aside from our wider energy storage portfolio, you might know us better as the publishers of PV Tech magazine, Energy Storage News, Current News, and also Solar Power Portal. To see our full portfolio, subscribe for free to our publications and also register for one of our many other free digital summits going on over the summer months. Please visit www.solarmedia.co.uk. So we've got 3 great Beyond Lithium case studies lined up for you this morning. But before we get going and I bring our moderator onto the stage, I'd like to share a few housekeeping notes with you all. Firstly, I'd like to draw your attention to the special training session, which Clean Horizon Consulting are running today from 1 p.m. till 4 p.m. BST. This is a paid-for training. There is still time to book your space, and it will look at the main European regulations for energy storage and is essential for anyone trying to tap into the European markets. Secondly, don't forget to log into our Meet Me Zone this week. This is a dedicated networking space which you can use to organise meetings with other participants, meet new partners, also new suppliers. Thirdly, if you have any questions for our speakers, please pop them in the questions tab, which you can see to your right, and we'll make sure that they all get answered for you during or at the end of the session. There will be enough time for Q&A. And finally, we have some polls going on. So you can see on your right in the polls tab, we have one active poll out of the following, which is most critical in order to accelerate the energy storage market. Please fill that in as the session is going on. And finally, all of the content which you see today will be recorded and available on demand after the sessions are over. So now I'd like to move on to the main part of today's session and welcome our moderator, Andy Colthorpe, the editor of Energy Storage News, to the stage.
Thanks very much, Lucy. Hi everybody. I'm Andy Colthorpe, the editor at Energy Storage News. Have been for about 5 years since the site started as an offshoot from PV Tech, which is Solar Media's decade-long running solar technology website. And yeah, I'll keep this very brief because, we've got some, the guys that are about to speak are far more interesting than I am, obviously. But I just also firstly like to take a quick opportunity to say thanks very much to Lucy, Maria, and the rest of the production team who've put the event on. Clearly, I think, on social media and stuff, it probably looks like Energy Storage News is taking a lot of the credit for putting together such a great set of speakers and panel discussions and topics and so on. But while we did have some input into kind of some of the overall topics and so forth, it's been the production team and all the staff behind them that have really delivered on this and made it, I think, really worthwhile. And, everyone's talking about the new normal. I hope it isn't necessarily 100% going to be just like this forever, but it is also great that we can bring all these people together with basically a very low carbon footprint, I suppose, is one way of looking at it. We've got 3 great speakers coming up, and that will be looking through different types of energy storage. This part of the series is provocatively titled Beyond Lithium. I don't think anyone thinks that lithium's going to go away, but on the other hand, lithium's only been there a short time. We still see that obviously the majority of already installed capacity in the world is pumped hydro. People never tire of telling me that. So I think, it's going to be a lot of different things, and to coin a phrase, possibly all of the above, and what proportions those will be in, we're not sure yet. So to take us through one of those 3 options that we'll be talking about today, be Dr. Javier Cavada of Highview Power. And if Lucy, if you'd like to invite Javier onto the stage, and take it away, Javier.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Lucy. Very good day, everybody. And indeed, it's really great with a very little carbon footprint that we have been able to join this great discussion, and a little bit of coffee footprint, but that's still, I think, is pretty much welcome. So if I can get my slides into the page. Fantastic. So, I mean, I'm coming here representing Highview Power. I mean, we are definitively beyond lithium batteries. I mean, we are a team that is leading this company that I believe we are quite knowledgeable about lithium. We have been installing lithium battery energy storage plants in the previous years. As you know, is the most commercially known system, but the company Highview was born 15 years ago to create a pump hydro industrial solution. So that's how to make a pump hydro capabilities in an industrial package, in a way as some customers would say pump hydro in a box. And in that sense, that's why it's large scale, it's long duration, but it is cryogenic. And cryogenic means that we are talking about very low temperatures, the same temperatures you have in handling of gases like oxygen or nitrogen when you are liquefying them, or LNG or any kind of gas for transportation. So we are really reducing the air that we are breathing into liquid so that we can transport energy in means of a liquid, a cryogenic fluid. But then we're expanding it and blowing a steam turbine. But in a nutshell, very well proven concept, aiming really not to beat or to take lithium out. Lithium has a wonderful market, a great space, but we are taking all the market between lithium up to the large pump hydro or hydro plants that are already available. So if I move here, the technology, I mean, it's called liquid air, but the commercial name is called cryo battery. I mean, it's a battery because we are having a numerous amount of tanks. Those tanks are storing liquid air. I mean, the air, as you know, has three main components. Is nitrogen, is the majority of it, then oxygen and argon. So what we're doing is taking the air that we breathe, cool it down until it becomes liquid, and store it in tanks. And you can store it for hours, for days, for weeks, for months, and when you need it back, you just gasify it again, which means you warm it up until it expands, and it expands 700 times. That means it's an enormous energy density. So we're talking about very industrial, very well proven concepts. I mean, it's something that Highview has been working on getting the cost as low as possible in terms of this technology. The larger, the lower relative cost has a very steep economy of scale. So the larger, the better in a way. You can imagine that we have a steam turbine that is using air to produce electricity back into the grid. And if you double your steam turbine, you don't double the cost. You multiply your cost by 1.4, 1.45. So and that, let's say, anti-logarithmic scales are showing the cost of our system. Of course, zero emissions mean the most exotic material that our system is utilizing is steel, stainless steel, carbon steel. So very easy to recycle, is part of existing supply chains, and very locally sourced anywhere in the US, in Europe, in Asia, anywhere. Zero water impact. I mean, there is no cooling needed. I mean, there is no warming needed. A set can be built anywhere, so can be placed next to a city, next to a house, of course, next to an industrial park, or in the middle of nowhere, paired with wind and solar. But the thing is that you build it as per the need. You need 50 megawatts in one place, you build 50 megawatts. You need 100, you build 100. You need 200, you build 200. You need 6 hours, you build 6 hours. You need 20 hours, you build 20 hours. You are not limited by biologically driven factors like the amount of water you can move, or in case of compressor, which is the other technology which is having very similar capabilities, you are not looking for any underground cavern. So we're talking about round-trip efficiencies over 60%, that can be over 70% if you would utilize other sources of heat and cold, but a standalone system, you get a 60% efficiency out of the power you are charging your battery with. You know that there are technologies which have a higher round-trip efficiency, there are others which have a lower one. In this case, the bigger we are, the better are the economics in that sense. So for that reason, in a system, in a storage that needs to store 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours onwards, I mean, our economics are getting better and better. And well, there is no technology today deployable like Highview technology. that can provide better economics than we do. So, and we are talking always about giga scale. I mean, mostly hundreds of megawatt hour. We scale up very easily financially. So the bigger, the cheaper, you could say, but also the smaller, the more expensive. So I mean, we are not for a 10 megawatts or a 5 megawatts scheme. So that was the summary. A very quick picture of how the system looks like in terms of engineering or schematics here. We have like every storage or every battery, we have a charging station, we have a storage station and a discharging station. The charging station is a liquefaction process, very similar to, well, identical to what you have in an air separation unit when you have a plant producing nitrogen or a plant producing oxygen out of air. You have exactly the same system. The difference is that our system is simpler. We don't need to separate nitrogen from oxygen, so we keep it all bundled in terms of having it inert. So there is no hazardous behavior of our gas once liquefied. So it's not like oxygen that has some explosive capabilities. In our case, nitrogen is the biggest part, so you can store it. It's inert, is in a way hazard-free, kind of cryogenic. But the hazard you have here is that it can boil off if it's not well isolated. So you store it in tanks that are double-wall insulated stainless steel tanks, the same ones you have for LNG, the same ones you have for nitrogen, for oxygen. And again, the bigger the tank, the more hours of storage you have. And you can imagine that the tanks is the lowest cost part and the less sophisticated part of the whole system. So quite opposite to lithium batteries. Lithium batteries, the battery cell is the most sophisticated and is the one that you need to replicate every time you grow your energy storage. You want double, you need double battery cells. If we want double megawatt hour or double hours, we just double the tanks. And the tanks is the smallest piece of the kit. So 100 megawatt plant of 10 hours is going to cost you the same as 100 megawatts 15 hours, because we're only increasing lightly the diameter or the height of the tanks to store those hours. And the discharge, as said, is a steam turbine blown or using air, which is, as said, the cleanest way to, or it's almost like a massage to a steam turbine. Is a very low demand application of a steam turbine with a generator. And we have agreements with people like Siemens, like Baker Hughes, like GE, like ABB, like MAN, who are the main manufacturers of the different components into the system. And so you can imagine, very well proven, very well applied. And in a way, this is taking oil and gas engineering and reapplying to the renewable world, because we have a 100% clean energy storage system here. On top of being a storage system, because this is a battery, this is a large battery, a gigantic battery, it has really multiple rotating systems. It has a generator, it has a steam turbine, and has multiple compressors during the compression and liquefaction. So it provides mechanical inertia, rotating inertia to the grid, which creates synchronous compensation, reactive power, and fast fault current in feed. So in a way, this plant, this technology gives the same services that you get from a fossil fuel plant, but without fossil fuel, without emissions. Very much, again, like a pump hydro. So you don't have lack of balance, you don't have of inertia, you don't have lack of reactive power, and you don't need to curtail your wind or to stop your solar when there is not enough balancing in your grid. As said before, zero emissions, no combustion, environmentally friendly. As said, nothing that is, there is not single geography or region in the world that does not have this kind of systems in terms of liquefying gases and steam turbines and tanks hosting gases. What Highview Power is packaging it all, and we are a developer. We are developing our projects with our proprietary technology and no water impact. So that's pretty crucial, especially in the solar regions like California, Arizona, Chile, north of Africa, Middle East, etc. So no water impact and no fire risk, which is pretty important. So if we look at where in the market we play. Here we have in the vertical axis the duration of the storage, so the hours, which tells you the megawatt hour, and in the horizontal you have the megawatts. So we start in 25 megawatts. We can do smaller, but the cost increase exponentially and also go down exponentially when we get bigger. So from 25 megawatts up to, I mean, the systems we could put 1 gigawatt taking off-the-shelf components from the OEMs I mentioned. And we start from 4 hours onwards because the system is identical. If you put 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, it's the matter of how many tanks. So that's why the economics make already beat all the technologies in 4 hours, get better in 5, get better in 10, get better in 15, 20 onwards. So this plant has been running, the one in the picture bottom left is in Manchester, has been running for 2 years. Now it's a 5 megawatts, 3 hours in this case, because the capacity market at that time in the UK was the rail at 3 hours, but adding more tanks like the ones in the picture in vertical, you can put 10 hours, 20 hours, 30 hours, as many as the grid demands, and has been running successfully and providing instantaneous services to the grid, not only storage, but also stability, inertia, black start, all ancillary services and capacity and balancing services you would need. Just concluding, I mean, we're in this 2020, which is a really historical year for the humankind. I mean, with all the events that we are going through, for Highview Power, it's a tremendous year. I mean, we have got investors coming into the company, bringing equity to put that equity in multiple projects. We are in the process of execution. So we are in the process of execution, meaning construction this summer of the first giga plant in a way, which is of 50 megawatts, 50 megawatts with 6 hours of storage in the UK, so 300 megawatt hour. And we have another project in the US that is the same size, 50 megawatts, but we are talking about 10 hours, so it's going to be 500 megawatts. And we have many more projects coming. I mean, as a developer, we're putting our equity in the 2 main markets today, European market in the UK and American market in the US. And we see, frankly, that the US is the largest market going forward for us. And I said, really cool, really safe, and well, we are seeing a rehearsal of the climate change doomsday in this lockdown we are. So with energy storage, we really can make sure that we can have 100% renewables, but already in few years from now, not in 1 decade.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Javier. Now, so quick virtual round of applause from everyone watching, I'm sure. I mean, we did have a couple of questions prepared, but I've noticed now, are you able to see the questions tab alongside, or would you like me to just fire them off for you?
Yes, I can see that I don't see any questions, or maybe there are many. No, I don't see. Actually, I can see Andy. I'm with you. Yes, okay. I can see. Yes, I mean, you want me to take any? I see there are 5 here that.
You know what? I guess you could probably rattle through the first couple. So someone's just asked what's the overall round trip efficiency, which I think you did just say is around 70%. So
exactly, exactly. And I want to highlight that the round trip efficiency here this is a game of economics. I mean, you are having a very large system, so you need to be available for the grid. It's a bit like a pump hydro. I mean, having a large round trip efficiency is very important if you are constantly operating, but if you are providing services like balancing, like being your insurance of the grid stability, I mean, the round trip efficiency in our system, we can make it bigger by investing more money. So in a way, isolating more heat and isolating more cold, you increase your round trip efficiency. So we have seen economically that in mature grids with renewable penetration, over 50% round trip efficiency already makes financial sense for this system. That's why we go always for 60 plus. But as I said, this is a thermomechanical energy storage. So engineeringly, or as an engineer, you could talk about as big as you want. It's a matter of how much money you put in isolation. But the standard 60+% up to 70%. That's the standard.
Okay, sure.
That's for the first one. So if I can see, I mean, the last question is asking about ramps and limitations. So as I was saying, the Manchester plant we have is instantaneous. And I tell you, this plant is able to go from 0 to 100% in 10 seconds due to the mechanical nature of the components. In those 10 seconds, you are 100%. But of course, in the first second, you are already providing power to the grid. If you want to have 100% in the first 10 seconds, you need to hybridize it. And in Manchester, we have done it. We have put flywheels, and you can put super caps, and you could put lithium-ion. The thing is that lithium-ion for 10 seconds doesn't make a lot of sense financially. And also, our system overall has a life cycle of 30, 40 years of existing running life. So, I mean, we look always to hybridize with technologies that will also last something like 30, 40 years. So in about the ramps, you can be instantaneous. But as I said, we expect to be in a grid with a lot of lithium also. But lithium will be big in megawatts. It's very small in megawatt hour as it is today. I mean, the average lithium-ion is 1 hour, 0.1 globally installed base. So, I mean, our systems will be average, I mean, closer to 10 hours than that. So
Okay. Hey, when you do the questions, I think if you could just read out the question first as well, just for the benefit of anyone that will be watching this afterwards on demand, and in case they're not able to see the questions tab on their screen as we go. So there's one there from Royer asking about the safety aspect. And I think you did mention non-explosive during your talk, and I kind of crossed out a bunch of questions I was going to ask about that. Do you want to just maybe tackle that one? Just read out the question if possible.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, let's say that we are talking about really very mature technologies and components. I want to highlight. I mean, Roger is talking about compression, compressed air having explosive risk. I mean, so you know that we are also surrounded by compressed air, and we are also surrounded by liquid gases in hospitals, in schools. I mean, next to my home, I have a small hydrocarbon tank also in case of solar not being good enough. If you would break into the tanks, you would see your liquid. You see your liquid, and these are like liquid nitrogen mostly. This is what it is, and it will go boiling off in the coming hours and days until it disappears because of the contrast between -200 that the liquid is and 20 degrees or 0 degrees or whatever you have in the ambient. So there is no risk of explosion here. It's not flammable. There's no explosive risk. I mean, you need to put a bomb to make it explode in a way. So this is not a hydrocarbon again. So
okay.
LNG technology, oil and gas technology in terms of safety standards, but a very inert and non-dangerous means of storage. That's the key thing. If I read the questions as you were saying, I see Kiran asking for the footprint. I mean, that's a very good one. I mean, it's asking acres per megawatt. 300 megawatt hours, so 50 megawatts, 6 hours, we are in the verge of 2 acres. So you would say if you would put lithium to do the same, we are more or less closer to half of what lithium would do, because lithium is needing a lot of surface, and I can say that in the market we are the lowest surface density technology, but this is due to our thermal importance. So we need to isolate the cold, isolate the heat, so we need to have everything quite compressed and together. So we are in a very small footprint, but we go in height. As you have seen in the picture of Manchester, our tanks are normally standing up, so that means that we have a quite tall deployment. So if I look at other questions that we are having here,
Corentin from Clean Horizons question there about he says that he thinks the Stability Pathfinder tender to deliver inertia through to National Grid.
Yes, that's
very interesting revenue, and you guys are pre-qualified. Is that something that you're going to pursue?
Absolutely. I mean, let's say that UK. I mean, we all know UK pretty well. I live in London as a way of life. is a very peculiar market. Is probably the leading market in lithium-ion today, but it's the leading market in innovation too. And UK has been losing around 150 million pounds last year, 2019, due to lack of synchronous compensation, due to lack of inertia, due to lack of balancing. And why? Because there is a lot of wind coming, some solar, but a lot of wind, and that is unbalancing the system, and they need to call the thermal power plants and stabilize the grid, giving this inertia, which means that you are curtailing the wind and the renewables. So National Grid has created something that is going to be everywhere, in every country, in every grid. Is going to be a stability services market and a constraint management market in which you need to be paid for those services. So the thermal power plants give those services as a default because they have rotating equipment, but the wind doesn't give them, solar doesn't give them, I mean, lithium batteries don't give them, but systems like Highview Power, like Highview Power with cryogenic energy storage, we give it. So we have been pre-qualified. This market is opening up. It opened up in November last year, and we are going to have a big auction for the UK in middle of this year, and a larger auction expected to be end of this year for Scotland. That you see there's the generation of wind and the consumption coming to the south. So definitively our system is a storage system, but provides all these stability services as default again. So it's like a thermal plant. And yeah, indeed, those revenues already make the technology financeable in that sense. So it's a great milestone for the deployment of large scale energy storage with mechanical and proven rotating equipment.
Okay, probably going to have to put time around now. But so we just do one more quick question from the audience, and it's been great how many some familiar names coming up in the list as well there. But what's the estimated construction time of the battery? Asked Pedro.
Yeah, I mean, let's say that the construction time of a system, we are building the first two plants now. We are going from 18 months to 24 months since breaking the ground until COD, until operation. I mean, we see that let's say the critical path is the manufacturing of the components and is the generator and the steam turbine, the ones that normally have like 1 year delivery time. If you have volumes and you have slots in the factories, as we expect to have, I mean, we are going to be below 1 year for full deployment. But as I said, these systems are not, I didn't mention the word degradation. There is no degradation in the storage capacity. I mean, everything degrades like in life, but there is your megawatt hour, your storage capacity doesn't go down. We're talking about liquid air, liquid gas in a tank. You don't get your volume smaller. And there is an interesting question here in there are many, but Alessandro is asking how long the storage can last, and he believes that they will be boil-off generated. Spot on. I mean, let's say that this storage technology, like is not eternal. You need to operate it, but you don't need to operate it every day. You don't need to operate it every week. You frankly don't need to operate it every month. We expect to operate every month, frankly, but you start to have a boil-off around 0.08% of your total volume per day, which is identical to what you have in a gas terminal when you are storing gas for other purposes. And comparing it to lithium-ion is below the loss of power inside of your battery cell. So indeed, we have a small boil-off, but it's not boil-off of gas, it's boil-off of coldness. The coldness is being lost. But if you operate it regularly, every week, I mean, you are not going to be seeing that happening at all. So it's much less, for instance, than the evaporation in a hydro plant because of the big surface.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Javier. And yeah, I think hopefully we'll have a chance to ask you a couple more questions at the end with the other panelists, and depending on how we do. But yeah, great. And thank you very much to the audience for a rapid fire of questions as well. So yeah, if our next speaker is ready to come on, I believe it's Ed Porter from Invinity that's on next. I think if you could come onto the stage, Ed.
Hi, Andy. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Sorry about that. Yes. Welcome onto the stage, Ed. Ed's with Invinity Energy Systems. I'll let you do the rest of the introductions, I guess.
Yes, yeah, great. So happy to be here. Thanks for having me. And yes, I'm the business development director at Invinity Energy Systems. Recently formed company, a combination of two former flow battery companies, Redti Energy and Avalon Battery Corporation, based out in Vancouver. Just waiting for some slides, if that's okay, to get started. Brilliant, thanks very much, Lucy. So here to talk about Beyond Lithium, so some flow battery case studies, and today want to talk about Invinity and our vanadium flow battery, but also behind the meter case study and an in front of the meter case study, and then just in general talk around storage across market characteristics. So in terms of Invinity Energy Systems, so who is our market? We are targeting businesses, industries, utilities, and electricity networks. What are the key features of the system? So commercially proven and cost competitive. Today we kind of see many applications where we're looking at sort of mid-teen IRRs. Safe and non-flammable, fully recyclable, and extremely durable. And one sort of interesting thing to note here is that the electrolyte that sits within the system, by the time the system is kind of at end of life, that electrolyte is ready to reuse on the next project. It is not degraded by use, which is sort of a very fundamental difference between flow and lithium. Then in terms of how do we deploy, so we are pretty much always deployed alongside renewable generation. And so the flow batteries make renewable energy reliable, delivering low costs, low carbon power on demand. To date, we have around 10 megawatt hours installed worldwide, and that's across Europe, Asia, North America, Australia, and Africa. In terms of how the system works, some of you may have seen Matt Harper yesterday run through this same slide, but essentially we have the core module on the left-hand side, which is made up from if you look at the center box, you can see our core module is made up from a tank which contains the electrolyte, which is where the energy is stored, and the stacks that sit on top that produce the power. So the electrolyte is pumped from the tanks into the stacks, and that's how it works in a nutshell. That system then scales through the battery module you can see on the right-hand side. 6 of those go together to make a pack, and those packs can be grouped together to make a battery cluster that you can see bottom right. And effectively, that's how we create large power stations. And because it's modular, we can sort of be very flexible in terms of the power and energy that we're looking to put onto a site. So without sort of further ado, going on to the case studies. So what is behind the meter? So essentially, this is demand and generation located together behind a single meter. I think lots of people know this, but just worth running through it. For example, sort of rooftop solar and storage at a distribution center. The case here for installing flow batteries is in summer. We are essentially looking for excess solar during midday to be stored into the flow battery to then be shifted to a sort of 4 to 7 peak price period. And in winter, we import overnight at cheap wholesale pricing, and we store that through the course of the day, again, to discharge against sort of 4 to 7 peak pricing period. By and large, it's kind of a very straightforward business case. So a lot of storage in the UK today is being deployed in FFR, for example, or EFR. But for flow behind the meter, the business case is very straightforward, with the majority of the revenue coming from that straightforward shift of energy from sort of midday or overnight to that peak price period. There are upsides from ancillary service revenues, and I'll come on to those in a moment. But in a sort of nutshell, how does this work? So in the UK, if you have excess solar on a site and that then spills onto the grid, depending on how you contract it, you could be paid anywhere between sort of £0 and £50 per megawatt hour for this. That is shown on the right hand side. So if you were to have a day ahead contract, so you receive the day ahead price. The blue line you can see there is for sort of mid-April 2019. So you can see if you were sending out your solar generation onto the grid, you would be receiving around £40 per megawatt hour for that solar generation. But then if you look at the red line, that's the 20th of April 2020. And obviously this is kind of very much COVID related as well, but it does give a view as to what the future might look like. And you can see here that if you were sending out excess solar around 12 o'clock on that day, you'd have probably been receiving around about £5 per megawatt hour. Now, you might have had that contracted on a sort of 1 to 2 year deal and be receiving a better rate than that, but it's just to give an idea of essentially the charging costs which the storage has to pay on site. So if you would have received £5 from the grid, but you can instead charge your storage system, then you're effectively charging it £5 per megawatt hour. In terms of how you then use that, so you can use that to offset your tariff, and between 4 and 7, that can be quite expensive in the UK. So with the network charges and the final consumption levies, that can go from sort of £150 per megawatt hour in the summer up to around £300 per megawatt hour in the winter. Obviously depends on every site is very different, and it obviously depends on location and tariff and all the rest of it. So to look at a case study, this is an industrial park in Dorset, UK. It's 300 kilowatt hour flow battery and 250 kilowatt peak ground mount solar. And if you look at the top left chart, this gives the power and the state of charge of the flow battery. And I think the thing I would take away from that is that it is not sort of static. There's no sort of period that it's sat waiting to be used to balance these sites between solar excess and demand on site. You have to be working quite hard, and that is both helpful from a sort of business case point of view, but also I think it underlines why we need sort of higher throughput storage facilities. This asset was also the first flow battery to qualify for FFR. It's a very interesting point, that, because I think one of the misnomers about flow that I heard a lot was that it was sort of a slow responding storage, but in fact, to qualify for FFR, you have to be able to respond under 2 seconds, and that was something we were able to qualify for. It's been operating in FFR since 2018, but it also brings me on to dynamic regulation. So that's one of the new services that have been put forward by National Grid as part of the SNAPs. And that's something that's really exciting for me, and I think for Flow, because what it does is it asks for a full response from the storage facility at 49.8 and 50.2 hertz. So it's really demanding quite a lot from the storage and quite a high throughput. And that very much plays into our strengths. So it's something that's quite exciting for us. I also sort of want to bring out one other part of this, which is that these kind of installations, so things that are around 300 kilowatt hours up to sort of 1 megawatt hour, I think these are very key installations, because at the moment they're very cost effective, and I think they're a way of installing a lot of solar and a lot of storage onto the grid, but doing it in a cost effective manner. But they also help to balance the local network as well. So I think they're a very cost effective solution, and I'd be very surprised if we kind of don't see this sector growing in sort of coming years. Moving on to front of the meter. So front of the meter is grid connected, but with no load alongside that storage facility. What is the case for putting flow onto these sites? So high throughput, very low degradation, and the asset is very flexible, very much sort of a replica of what I was talking about behind the meter. But the asset is very much able to do multiple cycles for trading, and is applicable for future grid services like dynamic regulation. A reminder that it's non-flammable, but also the point around the electrolyte not degrading during use. So by the end of life, you're then able to reuse that electrolyte in another project. One example here, and you may have heard Matt Allen talking about this earlier on in the week, but this is the Energy Super Hub Oxford, which is Pivot Power's project. This is a world first decarbonising power, transport and heat to accelerate Oxford's journey to zero carbon. It'll have the UK's largest flow battery, so 2 megawatt, 5 megawatt hour system. And you can see that in the bottom left picture. It's a transmission-connected hybrid vanadium and lithium flow system, and the system helps to balance electricity supply and demand and maximize the use of renewable energy. So I think the one thing that sort of really excites me about this project is the merge of two storage technologies. So the ability to be able to take the best elements of each technology is quite an exciting thing to see in action. And for some services, e.g. FFR, you have a proportional response according to frequency. And so some of the things we're talking around are how do we best organize the response from the site in order to minimize degradation on the assets. Another sort of very interesting question. We're also thinking about sort of the suitability of the site for the future services, and also how best do we trade them. So it's a really interesting project. It'll be live next year, and yeah, hope to talk more about it in the future. Then sort of onto this kind of final slide that I would like to bring up a new topic on, and this is really just to talk around this chart. Now, I'm not necessarily talking around the numbers within the chart, but I think it's a really interesting way of demonstrating storage technologies by their attributes. So if we look at the 2020 chart here in the middle, on your y-axis you've got your duration, so your hours per discharge, and on your x-axis you've got your sort of frequency in terms of discharges per year. So how would you use this chart? So if you were to look to discharge 100 times a year for a 1 hour system, that would put you sort of somewhere in that red zone, which would be a lithium application. But if you're looking for fewer discharges per year, you might say be looking for 10, but let's say 64 hours of duration, you might be looking for a power to X service, so something like hydrogen. And then if you're looking to cycle much more frequently, so something around the sort of 10,000 cycles area, you might be looking at something like a flywheel or a supercapacitor, which would be your bottom right, which is the sort of gold area on that chart. And for flow, we look anywhere between sort of 2 hours and 10 hours, and anything that's sort of cycling over 1.5 times per day, which is kind of broadly that purple region on the chart. But I think this for me is a really helpful way of thinking about the market. And I think the point I'm trying to get across here is that when we talk about beyond lithium, we're not talking about sort of getting rid of lithium in any way. It's about how do we how does flow, how does power to X, how do things like flywheels and supercapacitors, how do they help to complement other storage technologies to create the best solution for the application that you have in mind. And I think that's kind of a really key message. But the other key message of this is from 2015 to 2020, you can really see how quickly the market has changed. So from, say, the lead being a very strong solution in 2015 to lithium-ion very much taking over that space in 2020. So, you know, my question is, from 2025 to 2030, what does that chart look like, and sort of which storage technologies will expand and contract in that time? So to wrap up, vanadium flow is a leading non-lithium energy storage technology with 10 megawatt hours deployed in the field to date by Infinity. Flow generates profitable low carbon business cases without subsidy, so opportunities today behind the meter across EU, US, East Asia and Australia. In front of the meter applications are in development. With 2021, we'll be operating the UK's largest flow battery. And the final point is to say there's no one size fits all. So you should always choose your technology based on the application in question.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ed. So virtual round of applause for our audience, please. And yeah, it took a few minutes for them to get warmed up, but I think the audience did put in quite a few questions there, actually. So rather than go through the clumsily pre-prepared ones that I've put together, would you mind taking some of these on?
Sure. So
start with, if you don't mind, if we could start with Thomas McIver's question from 4 minutes ago. And he's asking about the targeted charging review. So this is a UK question.
Yes.
The targeted charging reviews limited the opportunity to make savings or peak triad, yeah, basically peak shaving essentially. So I don't know if you could maybe broaden this out a little bit to generally talk about peak shaving, you know, because that's a big opportunity in the US and in Canada, of course, as well. And you know, will be in the parts of the world.
I think this is a really good question, right? So absolutely, targeted charging review has changed triads in the UK. And yes, like it has changed our use case, but it's not to the point where it isn't commercially viable and a profitable model. Both, I think, sort of beyond this as well, we've seen both triads being removed, but also we're seeing GWOS rates being looked at as well. So you know, how energy is being charged for is changing very quickly. And I think as we look at the market today, we certainly have profitable use cases. But I think I kind of like to extend that question on a bit further, which is to say that I don't think that market changes are going to stop here. So I don't think we're just going to stop at triads being removed and GWOS bands changing. I think we'll also see, as more and more solar is added to the grid, I think we're going to see how people are charged for their energy fundamentally changing. So we're going to need people to try and be as flexible as possible. I'd be very surprised if we don't see very low wholesale tariffs in the middle of the day as we try and find demand for that solar that's deployed. I think we will then also see very high pricing in those peak price periods. And some of the ways that other countries do this is they will have a sort of peak demand charge coming up monthly or annually, and those models are also quite interesting for Flow. So there's you know, anything that has a kind of that peak demand is something that we can target and we can try and reduce consumers' bills on. So yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think it's also something that's very much underappreciated. I think people think the industry will sort of remain static forever, but the speed that solar is being deployed, I think it's going to change very quickly in the next 5 to 10 years.
Absolutely. And yeah, should we try and rattle through as many of these as we can? And
yeah.
So Kirsty Berry asks, I don't know if you're allowed to tell us, can you give us some feel for the financial returns on the Dorset system?
Yeah, so I can't give exact numbers on that, but I can say that for that type of system in that type of place, you're looking at low to mid-teen IRRs for the solar and storage installed.
Right, sure, okay. So let's combine two of these questions in that we can kind of get through them quicker, I think, this way. So Andreas Paul asks, what's the lifespan of the stack and what sort of warranty does Invinity provide? But then also Roy Zaleta asks, how do you minimize the carbon footprint of vanadium and what he calls the environmental hazard it carries? So talking about lifespan, warranty, and I guess sustainability, footprint and impact, I guess.
Great. Okay. So yeah, two good questions. So the system can be warranted for 20 years. The lifespan of the stack is around 10 to 12 years. So that is replaced once during the 20-year lifespan of the system. So that was a quick one. And then the second one is, how do you minimize the carbon footprint of vanadium and environmental hazard that it carries? So vanadium's not a heavy metal. It is fully recyclable as well. So kind of once it's been processed once, you can use it again in future projects. That is how we minimize it. So it's not something that's going to be degraded and have to sort of then go to landfill afterwards. It is something that we can kind of keep on reusing from project to project.
Right, and sorry, just to go a little bit off the audience questions for a moment. So we know that Avalon, which is one of the two companies that merged to create Invinity, did a business model of renting the electrolyte, you know, because that's a significant portion of the cost of the battery. Is that going to be part of the business model for Invinity going forwards as well, or one of a number of options, or, you know, where does that kind of figure in?
Yeah, I think so. The rental model is very interesting. So the rental model can really lower the sort of initial capex of the system, which is valuable for certain projects. There is a certain size though that kind of you need to get to in order to really be looking at that structure. So I'd say your sort of very small sort of, say, 6-pack type systems, you're probably not looking at a rental model, just because sort of the paperwork required to go alongside it. But for bigger systems, absolutely, I think it will be a standard model going forward.
Okay, and sorry, so the question here from Srinath Kara asks, are you using this technology for peakers only? Can they be used for baseload operations? So I guess that's a question about duration, really, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a good question. So in terms of duration, anything sort of between 2.5 to 10 hours is possible. I think in terms of how we're using it, though, is probably the better question within that. And essentially how we are using it is alongside solar. So for example, for a microgrid, the microgrid projects that we've been looking at, you can put in solar alongside flow, and to meet the sort of baseload demand for the full year, you're looking at something around 13 cents per kilowatt hour. So you're seeing it kind of not obviously as generation because it's storage, but going alongside other forms of renewable generation to provide a kind of low carbon baseload at a very low rate.
Cool. Okay. So we've got a couple more questions here, and I think two of them are kind of asking you to talk about direct competitors. So maybe it's not such a good idea to tackle those head on. But I noticed that Ramsey, the second part of Ramsey Yavuz's question, would you say that VRB technology is going past demonstration phase, going into deployment? And then also actually the first part was that there's a gigafactory announcement from Schmid Group in Saudi Arabia, just announced this week. So rather than asking you to comment on that, I guess if you could just give us an idea of how the manufacturing scale up potentially affects cost reduction opportunities, I suppose. And then also, whether you do think things are now earnestly moving from demonstration into deployment phase, I guess.
I think it's a really good question. And one of the real benefits from bringing together Avalon and Red T is being able to bring together those two manufacturing chains. So being able to bring together the best of both parts of that and bring the cost savings out of that process. In terms of, are we moving from demonstration phase into deployment? Absolutely. As I said right at the start of the presentation, we're commercially viable on a number of projects right now. So yes, we are being commercially deployed.
Terrific. Okay, and yeah, I mean some actual pretty good questions coming in as well, but I think maybe we'll have to save those for possibly an interview or a guest blog a bit further down the line.
Great, happy to.
Brilliant. Okay, so thanks very much, Ed. And yeah, if you can stick around, we'll try and fit in some questions for all three speakers at the very end. We'll see how we're doing for time. So thank you very much to Ed. And yeah, so our final speaker for this session is Charlie. Welcome, Charlie.
Here, Andy and Lucy, thanks for sorting it all out. And very good that this conference is happening, but also that it's got a Beyond Lithium bit, because more and more other technologies than lithium seem to be getting taken seriously, which is clearly good for us. My name's Charlie Blair. I'm sorry, Lucy, I think I've just lost our slides. Would you mind putting them back up? Super, thank you. Yeah, I'm Charlie Blair, Managing Director of Gravitricity Limited. As you might have guessed, we use gravity to store energy. We use the same physics as the pumped hydro that Andy mentioned at the beginning is still the vast majority of storage capacity in the world. But instead of using fluid weights and hydraulic systems, we use solid weights and rotary drive electric winches effectively. So we lift a heavy weight in a vertical underground shaft to store energy, to absorb electricity from the grid. Then that weight can sit at the top of the shaft or any point on the shaft as long as we like, and we can lower that weight back down again, discharging electricity back to the grid. So very simple physics, E equals mgh, just like pumped hydro, and a mechanical system, which is what gives us the differences from lithium and other battery technology. So I'm going to talk briefly about our technology plan. We're slightly earlier stage than the other two companies, hopefully not that much, and with a particular view on how we are different from lithium batteries and other energy storage technologies. So I don't need to go much into all of this. This is why we're all doing it. more renewables, more electrification of heat and electricity and transport, plus nuclear doesn't help. We're going to need a lot more flexibility on the grid. Lots of flexibility, incidentally, not all grid scale storage. And then within grid scale storage, I think we all believe there will be a bunch of different technologies. Even within lithium chemistries, there are a bunch of different technologies. So solid weight gravitational storage being one of those, along with cryogenic, along with flow batteries and so on. Here's the slide that I won't go into massive detail on, but feel free to ask questions on all of this. This is what makes our technology stand out. Primarily, we're portraying this against lithium batteries and pumped hydro. We have a very low levelized lifetime cost of storage. This is the key metric. It's the one we've done most of our work on, understanding how our lifetime costs compare with other technologies. I'll do one slide on that in a minute. Other than that, though, we have a fast response. It's a direct rotary system, acceleration under gravity. So up to full power within less than a second, meaning we can access the higher value energy storage applications. We have an extremely long cycle life and, for that matter, shelf life compared to chemical technologies. 75,000 cycles, that's sort of an order of magnitude bigger than lithium battery lifetimes. That's just until we replace basically the cables and some of the wear components in the mechanical kit. The core of the system, which is the shaft, the weight, and the winch drums, has a lifetime even beyond 75,000 cycles, so hundreds of thousands. High efficiency, this is the round trip efficiency, certainly up between 80 and 90%, which is as good or better than all alternatives. Remember, we need to be comparing with system level efficiency for lithium batteries, not cell or stack efficiency. So our round trip efficiency, as Javier pointed out, is not always important, but sometimes it is. Certainly if you're going to be doing a lots of cycles in anything like an arbitrage model, which looks like it's going to be more important in the future, you certainly don't want a low efficiency. The versatility between power, design systems that can output lots of power fast, so more like flywheels perhaps or supercaps, or a longer duration system that can output power over a longer period, so more like flow batteries, I suppose, is going to be important for a technology like ours that lasts a long time. Nobody wants stranded assets. We need to have that versatility as we build and as we into the lifetime of the system. And we are designing that very carefully within our system, including, if you think about it, a single weight system that can, all the energy is stored in one weight, which can drop fast, or we've recently or fairly recently patented a multi-weight system that outputs over a longer duration. We have a small footprint, and importantly, when we're sinking new shafts, can deploy anywhere. Our footprint is underground. Obviously, Javier said that their footprint goes up, but for multiple megawatt hour facilities and megawatt facilities, we're talking tens of meters buildings effectively. And then some advantages compared to lithium batteries, particularly, we don't have parasitic loads. There's no need for air conditioning, for example. There are effectively no standing losses at all. The weight can sit at the top of the shaft for not just days or months. It could sit for years if we wanted it to, although I absolutely agree that we would want to cycle systems to make commercial sense. And there's no depth of discharge limits at all. The system can output at full power, whether the weight is 1 meter from the top of the shaft or 1 meter from the buffers at the bottom of the shaft. There's no difference there. And some of the advantages, there's no explosive chemistry risk, and there's no problems with rare metals or other environmental impacts there. So as I said, happy to answer questions on this. Often I summarize this as we react fast, we're extremely durable, and the two of those things put together mean that we're very cost effective. And our levelized cost of storage, which is the way to be thinking about cost effectiveness within energy storage systems, we're pretty much at a levelized cost of storage below $150 per megawatt hour. So looking very good. These two slides are analysis we have had done by Oliver Schmidt, who's he's left Imperial College, but when he was at Imperial College, working on, as I said, levelize basically the lifetime cost of a storage facility. We look extremely competitive. Some detail on these two slides. The top slide, as you may know, if you've looked at energy storage a lot, you need to compare the lifetime, the levelized cost of storage for particular applications in order to get close to comparing apples with apples. That top application is for a 2 or 3 hour system, so normally a 10 megawatt, 24 megawatt hour system for doing some sort of peak shaving application. So 2, 3, 4 hours of output. It is a multi-weight system, and our capex is more or less where lithium batteries would be, a little bit lower. This is according to Oliver Schmidt's figures on costs of lithium batteries for that sort of scale. But over the lifetime of the system, our levelized cost of storage per megawatt hour is very significantly lower. Worth noting there that the lifetime in that model was 25 years with 2 cycles per day, 730 per year. If we lowered that lifetime to 15 years, we would still be looking competitive, but slightly less competitive, particularly compared to flow batteries and lithium. And if you took it down to 4 years, well, you would be wanting to deploy a lithium battery, which has a lifetime of less than of somewhere around 4 years. So yes, it varies considerably and which assumptions you put in there, but anything that needs that values a long lifetime and the sorts of distributed scales we're talking about, megawatts and tens of megawatts and megawatt hours and tens of megawatt hours, and the fast response, then we think a Gravitricity installation looks very exciting. And the bottom slide, a graph, is for a high power application, so a single weight system, doing a very different thing, doing very fast response, sub-second, and outputting only for 15 minutes or half an hour. Again, we're looking interestingly competitive in those sorts of applications. And a subtlety in here that for an energy design system, we can also output significant amounts of power, maybe not the peak power, but lots of power fast. And for a power application, we can do energy significantly cheaper. So that versatility there, we can't only do very fast response, like say a supercap, or only do longer duration, like say pumped hydro. So again, happy to answer questions on that stuff. Briefly, quickly running through where we're at. We're currently building that lattice tower on the left with a 2-winch system. It's 250 kilowatts. That is a concept demonstrator. It's not a commercial system. For commercial systems, we expect to go underground. We're planning our first full-scale underground deployment. So working on site development now, build out probably in 2022 or 2023. And commercial systems initially in existing mine shafts. So the hole in the ground that we need already there. So clearly reducing costs. But in due course, and this is very much a serious part of our business proposition, expecting to sink new shafts exactly where storage is required. So that would be exactly where permanent storage is required. And I'm very keen to discuss this idea that actually storage should be considered part of the grid, not as a little tag on to the grid to help it work, but actually if we can build grids with storage integrated into them, then we can save billions of dollars on building storage out across the world, and particularly across Africa and East Asia, where there isn't good grid coverage. This is our happy team. We're based in Edinburgh. We're expanding fairly fast. This is our route to market. You'll have realized that the bits of our system, basically winches, cables, gearboxes, motor generators, none of that is new science. It's new clever engineering and controls engineering. We're integrating systems that are already there, so we can get to market fast by working with partners. Houseman is a it's a Dutch company specializing in offshore winches. They are our current main partner, working with us on the concept demo, and will work with us on full-scale system design. Very quickly then, early market, as I said, existing mines. We're working with a number in Europe. mines that are closing are our sort of early beachhead market, because the mines and the local authorities are very keen to find uses for existing shafts, but also working in South Africa, working in mining regions around the world. You'd be amazed how many shafts there are. There are 59,000, believe it or not, vertical mine workings. That's just coal in the UK. We don't think they'll all be usable, but there are certainly thousands and tens of thousands of existing shafts that could be suitable around the world. And then in due course, and this picture really is just to get people thinking, we're thinking of sinking shafts. We will be sinking shafts and deploying our systems exactly where they are needed. And exactly where they are needed could be in city centres. There is shaft sinking technology available that is, well, it's already sinking shafts for foundations for city skyscrapers, as in this sort of example, but also thinking about sinking new shafts exactly where the grid needs it, and where we're building new grid, where would the grid need it? So for me, that's the end of my presentation. Very happy to answer questions. Just putting this slide up, it's lights and grid connectivity across the world. Yes, we need to keep those lights on as we move to renewables in this country and in Europe and North America, but we're also electrifying the world. And as we do that, as we build that grid, how will we build it? We think energy storage can be built into that grid. And if we can build those grids for something like an average flow rather than the peak flow, which is how we do it now, then there could be billions saved by building long life energy storage into specific nodes in an interconnected grid. Can the sort of transmission and distribution grids of the future look slightly different? And my suggestion is, yes, they could be. I'm interested in answering questions on that. So, Andy, I think I see there are some new questions. Can I leave you to collate and ask me them?
No problem. Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Charlie. And yeah, quick round of virtual applause, please, from the audience. Yeah, firstly, I'm not sure if Vadim's question here is entirely serious, but it says, let's pump air to liquid with Gravitricity technology. Highview and Gravitricity must merge. Smile emoji.
Well, it's funny you should say that, actually. I don't know if it was a serious question, but it is. It shows how our sort of visionary technical director, Peter Frankel, thinks that it was thought of back in 2013, maybe not liquid air, but compressed air, that yes, if we have an underground shaft that is doing the job, it's using the geology of the earth to hold up many thousands of tons of weight for our systems, it's also a useful pressure vessel. If we put a cork on the top of it, basically, that is a nice pressure vessel. So we can hybridize those systems. And we have actually just received notification that we are due to be awarded our patent, which was submitted 5 or 6 years ago, on exactly that, on hybridizing a compressed air energy storage and a gravitational weight system doing different things. So a single weight system can output lots of power fast. A compressed air energy storage is better at a combination of those might have very interesting commercial applications. So even if it wasn't a serious system, it was an interesting thought. I don't know about combining with Highview, but certainly combining with CAES could be very interesting.
Cool. Okay. And yeah, the next question I think is one that, I think we knew this would come up, and I certainly, wanted to know more about this. So Jeffrey Douglas says, what's the energy cost to create new holes for this type of storage? And seems like there's a bit of noise coming in from the ether there, but yeah, if you can still hear me. And yeah, I guess at the beginning I was going to ask you, what's the cost of developing new sites versus repurposing sort of existing mines? And I guess for you guys, the opportunity to repurpose mines is certainly there for now anyway. So maybe that is a bit more in the future before you'll even need to think about it. But yeah, what might the dynamic be of actually creating a new site as opposed to repurposing a mine site, for example?
Yeah, well, it's something we've done a lot of work on, and our kind of, obviously for the last 3-4 years, we've done a lot of internal work confirming that we think this is worth doing, that we think it's feasible and viable. And that levelized cost of storage modeling, the sort of headline figures in the reports that you might have seen, if anyone does want to see them, please just email info@gravitricity.com. The headline figures there were for existing shaft systems, but we actually modeled in there or plugged in our CapEx numbers for new shaft systems. This is for using existing technology, not in a normal way. So sinking a shaft at the moment is costly, there's no doubt about it. But even doing that, we were looking at levelized cost of storage for long lifetime systems for 15 or 20 year outputs, not for 10 year, that were competitive with lithium batteries and flow batteries. So I have to say that slightly surprised us when we did that work 2 years ago, 18 months ago. And we think there is very good potential for bringing the cost of the shaft sinking down. So it absolutely is in our intentions to sink new shafts and deploy our systems in new shafts. We can do different things, and we would be doing it for different reasons, fundamentally where there is a long-term requirement. So where that energy storage is becoming effectively part of the grid infrastructure.
Right. So I was going to say, I guess the only real disadvantage with the mine sites is that they might not necessarily be that near to where the energy demand is located.
So yes, the disadvantage is we can't choose where it goes. A mine shaft is where it is. So for most transmission type applications, so for frequency response, what we call ancillary services in the UK, what you need is a transmission grid connection. And it doesn't really matter broadly where you are within the grid. And conveniently, most mine sites will have had a very high transmission grid connection because they had big machinery. So the grid connection, generally speaking, looks good. So for the sort of energy storage applications that are being built, certainly that lithium-ion batteries have been built for over the last 2-3 years in the UK, where they're doing an enhanced frequency response type application, the location doesn't matter too much. And those are the ones that are interesting for mine sites. Worth noting that mine sites are brownfield sites. They do very often have large industrial facilities on them that would be off-takers of power as well. So there is a surprising synergy in there. But no, we can't choose where it goes. For a new shaft system, we could choose where it goes. We would only want to do it.
Nope. We lost you there, Charlie. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me again, Andy?
Yeah, we've been doing so well with the Wi-Fi so far today, but yeah, we lost a few seconds there, I think. Unfortunately.
Andy, can you hear me? I can hear you absolutely fine.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Don't know if any of you can hear me. What I'll do is I'll try disconnecting my internet and reconnecting and see if I can join back in.
Sure. I think some other people had a bit of a question with that, just sort of, once they're refreshed and come straight back in. So, okay, well, let's hope that Charlie can be back with us momentarily. Seems to have lost his audio. I hope it wasn't because of the questions that people had lined up. I'm sure it wasn't. Can you hear us, Charlie? Right, okay.
Andy, I've tried disconnecting, reconnecting. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah. Can you hear me? Hello?
Andy, should we maybe invite the other speakers back on stage and I'll try and get Charlie back into the room?
Sure, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you absolutely fine.
Okay, cool, okay.
I think it's a problem on Charlie's side.
Okay, well that's unfortunate, but yeah, we've been doing pretty well, and I guess we've kind of run over time, so maybe the powers that be are trying to cut down. Yeah, okay, if we can get Javier and Ed back on, we'll just do a quick Q&A, and hopefully maybe Charlie can hear us.
Yeah, I can hear you. Oddly, I could hear you all the way through.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that.
That was embarrassing. All right, cool. All right. Well, should we just do? Can we just do one more question for you, Charlie, and then we'll bring everyone else in? And I think there's one from Gunther about what's your OPEX on your systems. So that'd be operational expenditure as opposed to the CapEx and things that need to be replaced, stuff like that.
Yeah, sorry for being a bit evasive. We don't know in massive detail, but we know from the way winches work, the way cables work and so on, that the sort of day-to-day OPEX is extremely low, comparable to pumped hydro in sort of well under 1% of your CapEx per year, rather than, and we don't have any of the sort of ongoing either energy or operational or maintenance costs that you might have for certain chemical systems. So very low, without giving detailed numbers, largely because we don't know, depending on how we'll design future systems. But winches, we'd be replacing, as I said, cables, we'll be replacing brake pads, and some of the moving electrical systems, but that would be after tens, if not hundreds of thousands of cycles. The day-to-day, month-to-month maintenance, extremely low as a mechanical system.
Okie dokie. Okay, well, let's just do a couple of quick questions for the assembled panel. I think let's keep it brief because I think we've been quite lucky with the internet so far, and I'm not sure how much longer our life's going to hold out. And I noticed that Ed's video's gone, but hopefully he's still with us. Oh, here he is, in spirit. So yeah, I think one thing I'd like to, so the Beyond Lithium strand. So to what extent do you guys see your technology replacing today's options for energy storage versus being a complement to them? And I guess we could go around in the order that we started the presentation. So Javier, and then Ed, and then Charlie, if possible, please.
Thank you for that, Andy. I mean, so we all, have been quite long in the energy industry. So not doing energy storage or renewables before. At least I have my credentials with oil and gas, like most of people who have been long. And definitively, energy storage is not going to be an exception in the sense that it has to be a assembly of technologies. There needs to be a hybridization of the grid with short duration, very fast response, longer duration, sensitivity. There will be places that one technology makes more sense than others. There will be very hot places. There will be places that you will have the hole already in the right place. There will be, I've been leading a company called Greensmith as the president of Baxilla Energy for several years, and I know together with Invinity they have been going to this project in Oxford. Very proud of my teammates from the past, and you can see that's an example of a pure hybrid system already. Our Manchester plant, the Highview Power plant, is having flywheels, is having supercaps, and then the cryogenic energy storage, and it needs to be a mix. And frankly, and I will close it there, when people are asking, when good friends like you, Andy, is asking, who is your competitor? I always say my competitor is the fossil fuel. Any other energy storage is our alliance, is our friend. We all are complementary, and there will be, and I tell, in Highview we start construction of 2 gigantic plants. But if the planet is waiting for us to build 2,000 every year, we're not going to be on time. So we better have everybody rolling up their sleeves and implementing, executing.
Great. So I think I can pick it up from there and sort of pretty much echo all of those comments in that it's around picking the right storage for the right application, but also to kind of draw attention to that pivot project again, which is today trying to work out the how best to combine flow and lithium. But those conversations of how best to combine two technologies will keep on happening. We'll see different combinations across different sites over the next 5-10 years, and how the industry sort of learns to think about how best to characterize and how best to dispatch each technology. I think could be a really interesting part of the energy market.
I can step in. Unsurprisingly, I think I'm also going to say that different storage technology is going to complement both existing and other emerging technologies in the future. I think the interesting bit for me is how the applications are going to change, how they're going to be used differently. Lithium batteries have been working very well for applications that, certainly in the UK, have largely been designed for lithium batteries. So it's not hugely surprising. The grid companies, the industrial companies, the renewable energy generators, I think, are going to be starting to think about storage much, much wider in terms of what it can actually do. And that last slide where I put energy storage as part of the grid infrastructure, I think that is going to be a very major change. That storage is going to be used to avoid capex on grid, rather than just to create some added revenues or to reduce costs. And that's a pretty fundamental change, and it requires technology that has a longer lifetime. And the three technologies you've heard about just now have significantly longer lifetimes and higher cycle lives than lithium. So I do think, yes, we'll be complementary. I certainly think that lithium won't dominate the market anything like in 10 years' time as it is now, possibly not least, and I actually genuinely hope this is the case, because a lot of the lithium will be in electric cars, where it's perfectly designed for. There's a lot of lithium being used around the grid in applications where the extremely high density of lithium, to be honest, isn't really important for grid scale storage. It's not nearly as important as for EVs. And we need to be decarbonizing all of our energy. And to do that, I think lithium is an absolutely fantastic technology for use in vehicles. It's a fantastic technology for use in certain grid applications, but I don't think it'll be used in all of them by any means.
Terrific, thanks. And I think probably we'll wind this up with the last question for today. Although there's plenty I think we could still keep talking about, particularly around, I think, grid energy storage as an infrastructure asset, and of course in terms of renewables and decarbonisation. And actually, I think after this question, if you want to just round off with your a short statement or commentary on how you see those things, that would be great. But one thing that's actually been kind of on my mind from a technical side of things is that with lithium-ion companies that we speak to a lot, and with the energy storage system integrators, things that we hear almost as much as the storage medium itself are the energy management systems and battery management systems. They're probably as big a differentiator as anything else, really, I suppose. So yeah, just wondering if you guys could sort of give us a comment on the sort of control systems that your systems require, whether it's particularly different from that, and what you guys have sort of developed in that line. And yeah, if we go in the same order again with Javier starting off again.
Absolutely, and thank you for that, Andy. I mean, so again, personally, I have that background coming from a company like Greensmith or Wärtsilä, that the energy management system was the cornerstone, because at the end, lithium-ion, you get them from the different South Koreans or Chinese or Asian normally manufacturers of the cells. So your value adding is the energy management system. In Highview Power, very much following that line of thinking. I mean, we have a control system called Blue Control, from B from battery, L from liquid, U from unified, and it's a proprietary control system. Is managing the battery, it's the battery management system, but it's managing the coalition of the hybridization with other assets in the grid, or with interconnection, which is mostly an infrastructure interconnectivity asset. Most of our patents, I mean, we're a technology company with tons of IP. Most of our patents are embedded into that energy management system. That indeed, you're right, we didn't talk about it. I mean, our investors like Sumitomo Group, etc., I mean, they know very well, I mean, what they invest in. I mean, they invest in their intellectual property, but on that product, that is the energy management system, that always is delivered by Highview Power. So, spot on question.
Pick up from there on the EMS side, to say that we have our own battery management system, and in terms of then how we're controlled, we're very much set up to be controlled by other parties in terms of aggregators that we can work with, and I think this is one of the realizations that's come from trying to do a number of systems across a number of sites, and that's kind of part of that becoming commercially ready, is that you sort of go through that process of kind of road testing other people's controls on your system. So for example, we're working with open energy on a few sites in the UK, but have worked with other parties, and yeah, so that's very much kind of the first piece on the EMS. And the sort of message I will leave you with for Flow is that we're very much a commercially ready technology today, which I think is kind of a key message.
Okay, thanks, guys. I'll step in on that one as well. The control systems are a big core part of our IP, as well, as Javier said, and sort of how our system gets on different layers of control system, if you like. There are some very interesting controls challenges that we're dealing with at the moment. It's one of the reasons we're building the concept demo that we are currently building for controlling multiple winches and for understanding the dynamic behavior of the winch in the shaft. All of that will be kind of behind the scenes as far as our customers are concerned. So there's a large elements of that control that I suppose are equivalent to understanding how the chemistry of a battery system degrades, and that gets put into the battery management system. Then there's the kind of operational management system of a system. So is it rising, charging, lowering, discharging? How quickly can it respond to a signal or load follow, and so on, which is all of the external facing control bit, which we are in the process of sort of developing with a controls partner in Glasgow and with our partners, winch partners, Houseman. That's going to be core for our commercial model. It's worth noting that our commercial model isn't to build gravitational storage projects. We will build the first one. We'll probably be involved in building the second and third and fourth. But our model is to actually sell equipment and expertise, and that's including the control system, to project developers who could be mines, could be generating sites, could be industrial sites, could be grid companies around the world. And the different applications we've already mentioned, they're very different for storage in different countries at the moment. They'll be very different in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time. So there's the sort of different control algorithms for operating the system and maximizing revenues. And within those, there are some very interesting complex controls challenges for us. And it's a core part of our future. And really, in terms of the sort of the overall decarbonization thing, Javier got it exactly right, I think, when he said we've all got ambitious plans to build storage, build lots of storage that are going to make big, exciting companies for all of us and various other technologies. We've all got to do it, though. The grid is needing huge quantities of energy storage or flexibility in order to enable this full system transition. So we've all got to be succeeding and building stuff. And as Javier said, any of us succeeding, including lithium batteries, they've basically created the market that makes us feasible as a commercial proposition. Any of these technologies succeeding is good for all of the rest of us. So I really don't think it's a competitive thing. I'm certainly hoping that Highview and not Red Tea anymore, the new flow battery companies do well, because it enables all of the rest of us to do well.
Great. So that's yeah. I mean, we could keep going and keep going, but I think probably the audience is had something of their curiosity sated. But that's really nice, good vibes to finish on, I think, there from Charlie. So yeah, just like to join probably all of the audience in thanking our panelists today. And thank you to Lucy for getting us all here on time and everything.
Good. Thanks very much, everyone.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Great.
Terrific.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, everybody.
So thank you, everyone, for listening as well. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows that our next upcoming session at 1 p.m. Is a 3-hour training session. So we'll be running it in 2 separate parts. And if you would still like to subscribe, then you can do that via the website. So thank you very much, Javier, Charlie, and Ed, and also Andy, of course. And we will see you guys soon.